Hi guys, well today we're going to be taking a look at a mid-tower chassis which Corsair recently announced. This is the Spec Alpha. Now this case joins the rest of the Spec lineup within the Carbide series, but as you can see it is dramatically different from the rest of the cases in terms of the styling. In this case we'll offer up an alternative if you're looking for a gaming oriented chassis. Having first seen Spec Alpha at CES earlier this year, this modern and futuristic design has already attracted quite a lot of attention. Inside, this case is equipped with a traditional layout which offers up tool-free design, a triple fan configuration and plenty of storage options. Now in terms of the pricing for this case, you're looking at around about £70 if you are in the UK and then $80 if you are in the US. So still quite an affordable case really. And if you're looking to move a new configuration into a stylish enclosure, then this one might be of interest for you. As we progress through our video today, we're going to be checking out this case in lots of detail, looking at every aspect, so enjoy. Right guys, we're going to start at the very front of Spec Alpha. So here we've got the plastic fascia, which takes on a modern and a futuristic aesthetic with these angled contours, rather like a set of abstract polygons. Now as you can see, this panel does have areas of ventilation, and this points us to Spec Alpha having two cooling fans, and we're going to have a look at these in a moment. So as you can clearly see, because of the layout of this front panel, there are no 5 1/4 drive bays, so look elsewhere if you are still holding on to those optical drives. Now this front panel is removable. There are a series here of plastic latches on either side, and once you have eased those out, the panel just lifts off. And on the inside of that panel, we don't have a detachable dust filter as such. Instead we have this fixed sheeting, so that prevents the dust from escaping, and it will collect, and then you can vacuum that away. So underneath this panel we have two cooling fans which are 120mm, and these are also LED ready to give you a nice bluey white glow once they are powered up. So with the optical cage absent, this means that we've got direct airflow which kind of targets the CPU and its cooler. There is also the opportunity to include another fan at the very bottom there if you wanted to, because as you can see there are rectangular mounting coals rather than circular ones, which kind of gives you a bit more flexibility for placement. Now with that panel back on the chassis, the front panel connectivity here sits in a vertical arrangement on the right side, and this includes a power button, two USB 3 ports, a 3-stage fan controller there which is 4-channel, headphone and microphone jacks, activity LED, and the reset button. So that fan controller there is a very handy thing to have on the front of Spec Alpha, as it means that you can adjust the noise and the cooling performance on the fly. Up at the top of Spec Alpha we have a continuation of that design that we saw on the front, and there is a large section there of ventilation because, as you can see there, lifting that panel off, we have two optional 120mm fan spots. Okay, so for the side panels, on the prominent side here we have a large Perspex window which gives you the ability to showcase your system, while over on the other side we have just a solid panel. And we should say at this point that both panels extend out to provide you with a few more millimeters of clearance. So both side panels have two thumb screws for fixture, so we'll just take these panels off. So now we have a view inside Spec Alpha, and this case follows a conventional layout for a computer case. It accommodates up to ATX form factor, and around the case there we have plenty of storage and the cutouts there for the cable management. I'm going to explore this now in a bit more detail. Now the power supply sits at the very bottom of the chassis, and there are rubber mounts underneath it to cushion it. And there is a dust filter, but again it is just a thin sheet, so to remove that you're going to need to have your case on its side, and really on a case like this we'd have liked to have seen an easy to remove filter from the rear. And the other thing to mention is that there are mounting coils next to that power supply for installing a 120mm fan to add in extra cooling. Above the power supply we have a series of 7 PCI covers. Each of those have the ventilation cutouts, and they make use of a thumb screw so that you can get devices in and out easily. Placed at the back of Spec Alpha we again have another 120mm fan. This one is positioned to be an exhaust, and it lacks that LED functionality that those front fans bring. As we've already mentioned, at the top there we have two 120mm fan spots, but space is rather tight there, so it isn't possible to add in a radiator plus the fans to go with it. Now that we're inside the case, you can really see just how much space we have without that optical cage. It really does open things out, and it allows the front cooling fans to sweep across the system. Now for storage, we have this cage here which can house up to three 3.5-inch drives. All you got to do is slide the drive into one of those available bays while pulling back the lever, and then once that is in place, you just let that lever go and the drive is fixed. It does kind of still move around a little bit, but it does offer reasonable fixture. And then at the top there we have these two really neat adapters which can house two 2.5-inch drives, and again this is completely toolless. All you've got to do is pull that lever back, it has the pin attached to it, you slide your drive in, and then when you let that lever go it marries up with the mounting coil. So quite a nice use of space there. And if you do just have one drive to install, I'd recommend using the adapter which is closer to the board so that those cables there are more out of sight and tucked away. Now on the other side of Spec Alpha we also have some additional allocation for installing another two SSDs. So here you can see that we've already installed a 2.5-inch drive, and this again is a great use of space as these drives are even more concealed. However, with these two spots here you're going to need to get that screwdriver out and line up the drive and attach screws from the inside of the chassis. Okay, so we're now going to take a closer look at the clearance options within Spec Alpha, as this is quite an important area for you guys who are system builders who need to know whether something will fit or not. So for the CPU cooler, Corsair actually specify 156mm, which is definitely wrong here because you can see that we've got the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, which is 159mm, and you can see there that we've got even more space beyond those heat pipes, and especially since we have that side panel which kind of gives you a few more millimeters. So as an estimate, you've probably got around 165mm there. In the graphics card department, in that top spot there, you've got up to 380mm for the total length on that card, as it can extend right to the front of the chassis. Now we can remove that cage, but if you wanted to leave it inside, you've got up to 270mm for the graphics card, which actually leaves you with quite a few options. Now the location behind the motherboard tray is important for storing cables, but as you can see there is not a lot of space to play with here. There is under 1cm, and the side panel does give you a few millimeters, but even so, things can be extremely tight. You do need to get creative with that cable management and tie things back as much as possible. As far as cutouts and hooks go though, we've got plenty of those to make use of, and there are a fair few areas at the front of the case to tuck away unwanted cables. The only thing we are missing are those grommets. Okay, now Spec Alpha isn't exactly designed for water cooling, but there is some allocation here at the front if you wanted to install a 240mm or even a 120mm radiator. We've installed one of Corsair's Hydro series coolers, and to do this you just need to detach the hard drive cage. There are a series of screws which need removing. So if you wanted to liquid cool your CPU or even your GPU, then you can do that, but it would of course be at the cost of removing that hard drive cage. But after removing that cage, it does clear the way for some of these mounting coils here at the bottom of the case, which allows you to install an SSD, which is quite a useful thing. Okay, and finally guys, we're now going to do a quick sound demo to give you a better understanding of how loud Spec Alpha is with those triple 120mm fans. So we're going to have the fan controller set initially to low, and then we're going to move to medium and then high. So here goes. Okay, so that completes our look at the Corsair Spec Alpha. So I'm sure you'll agree, from a styling point of view, this is quite a departure really for Corsair in terms of what they usually bring to the table. This case is clearly aimed at the gamer, and the gamer which really prefers something which is bold and which takes centre stage. Now the exterior is quite a subjective thing, but I really like what they've done. I think it's quite a nice design. And just another thing to note is that Spec Alpha is available in all black and red and white too, so that kind of gives you a few different options. So inside, we've got loads of space there for your high-end kit. Big CPU coolers fit, multi-GPU configuration is not a problem, and then we've got the countless options there for the storage, whether those storage needs are 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch. And then further to this, we've got the 240mm support for the liquid coolers at the front, and then after that, you've still got options for 2 or 3 SSDs to install them. Now, I really like what they've done with the cooling. They've ripped out that optical cage, they've shifted the cooling up, and that really does give the cooling potential a massive improvement. And since we've got that fan controller, all the ingredients there to kind of keep those temperatures right down. And if you guys are interested in seeing what the performance is like on this particular case in terms of the cooling performance, please head on over to the full review, which is going to be on the screen and in the description very soon. Thanks for taking the time out today to watch this particular video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, then please hit that like button. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, really would appreciate if you could, so you don't miss out on any of our future content. Take care of yourself, and I hope you can join us again next weekend.